My name is William Seifert, prefer Bill. I was born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania on August 11th, 1949. Lived in Rutherford, Pennsylvania for about 14 years. Then my father was transferred to a new military base outside of Columbus, Ohio, in Newark, Ohio, where I lived with them until I was 18 years old, at which point I graduated from high school and received an athletic scholarship to Eastern Michigan University to play football. At that point in my life, I was basically working on getting my education, wanted to secure my teaching degree, and I met my first wife. And at that point, about 1972, 73, I was married, finished my education, secured my degree, went to work as a teacher for approximately 5 years in middle school, teaching 7th and 8th grade math and science. And then during the summertime, I would work for General Motors, and with what I was making working for General Motors, I turned around and decided to stay with General Motors because I was making more money than teaching. And I wanted to start a family, wanted to buy a house, and at that point, at that time, with teaching, the money wasn't there. So I went to work for General Motors, worked for them from 1976 to 1987, and took the buyout from General Motors because of the fact that they were downsizing. That's when the economy took a dip, and so they were laying off people. And instead of taking the transfer, I took the buyout. At that point, I went to work for University of Michigan Hospital. Started as an entrance supervisor, and then progressed to become an anesthesia technician in the University of Michigan main OR. And after being there for 7 years, I went over to the Mott OR, where I continued to work until I retired from there. When I first started working for University of Michigan Hospital as an entrance supervisor, after about 2 years, maybe 3 years, I started to have issues with my left shoulder not having full range of motion. I went and secured the orthopedic shoulder doctor at the university to discuss with him the problems I was having. Through x-rays and CT scans, it showed that I had bone spurs on the head of my humerus bone, and that's what was causing the limited range of motion. Through numerous attempts to loosen up the joint, they worked with me on physical therapy. They also worked with me and did what was called Synvisc injections into the shoulder, through the back, through the scapula, to hopefully inject fluid into the joint to be able to loosen up the head of the humerus bone. I went through 3 of those injections, waited about 2 to 3 months, and nothing positive happened. So in 2001, I ended up having a total shoulder replacement done. With that, it involved a lot of rehab. I had a lot of physical pain from the replacement that was done because I was what they considered too young at 55 to have a shoulder replacement done. I worked through it. I got back to work after about 7, 8 months, and everything was going along fine, and the shoulder was doing fairly well. I still didn't have full range of motion. They attributed that to the fact that they had to take some of the joint socket out in order to be able to accommodate the new prosthesis that they put in the shoulder. I went from 2001, when the surgery was done, to about 2006, when they determined that an infection had occurred in the shoulder. With the infection, there was a lot of issues, still not having full range of motion, also having moved from being a entrance attendant supervisor to an anesthesia technician. My chief CRNA noticed one day how red my arm was and confronted me on the fact that I had an infection and I needed to have it checked out. I had to secure the what's the word I'm looking for? I had to secure the a doctor that was trained and certified in infectious shoulder diseases, and to find out what was going on with the shoulder. I went through a lot of exams. I went through procedures where they had to inject a needle into the shoulder without lidocaine, without any kind of without any kind of pain management for me. And they had to draw fluid out from the socket and then have it tested. At that point, I was told that I needed to have the shoulder, the prosthesis that was in there, taken out and have the infection cleared up. That took from 2006 till late 2007 to go through in-home antibiotic procedures, where I had to have a stent put in my left inside my left inside upper arm, and then go and do 2.5 hours every day at home. At that point, they determined that the infection was cleared up, and I went back and had a new shoulder put in. At that point, everything was going well. I went back to work. I was still working as an anesthesia technician. And one day I was on off-site assignment, and I was pushing an anesthesia machine around the corner, and I heard a snap and a pop, and the tip of the prosthesis towards the elbow had broken out of the bone, and I was out again because of that. They had to go in and take the prosthesis out and try and put another one in. With regards to friendship and companionship, I've had more downsides than I have up. I've been married twice, and my first marriage was to a woman that I met while I was at school at Eastern Michigan, and we got married in my junior year. We went and lived in married housing. I finished playing football, and then I went and found a job as a building assistant, or what they call a hall monitor, at a high school in Ypsilanti, Michigan. We had our ups and downs, as all marriages do. We had our disagreements, and we also, I thought, had good times. And when 20 years went by, she decided that she no longer wanted to be married to me. She informed me that after 5 years of being married to me, she didn't want to be married anymore, but yet she kept dragging it out. Um, that hurt me deeply. It cut me to the quick. We have two children from my first marriage, my son Christopher and my daughter Christina. They both reside in Arizona. And it was very difficult. It was very emotional time for me. I had a hard time accepting it and understanding how after 20 years somebody could just finally say, don't want to be with you anymore. And so it took me 2.5 years of soul searching, therapy, understanding that life goes on even though you don't think it does. Life still goes on, and that it hopefully gets better. I went approximately 10 years from my first marriage, and I was working at the University of Michigan as the entrance supervisor, and I met this woman her name was Nicole. We met on the escalator coming up from the B1 level because I had to go take care of payroll as my responsibility as being one of the supervisors. And we stopped at the top of the escalator and we started talking. And we talked for a good half hour, 45 minutes. Found out we had things in common. We communicated with one another via text, and we asked each other out to go have dinner, or as they call it, coffee. And, we hit it off. I found out for myself that I had still some unresolved issues that I needed to take care of. And before the relationship could continue, I took about 2.5 to 3 months to go back into therapy. And I stayed longer than 2 or 3 months. I stayed actually about 8 years in the therapy to work through my issues with my first marriage and with my own personal feelings and so forth. And so in 2001, got married to Nicole. We were living in Tecumseh, Michigan, and things were going really well. We were both working for the university. We had good incomes. We did things. We went camping. We went up north during the wintertime to ski chalets. We went to Maui for a week. I mean, we did all kinds of things. And then all of a sudden, in 2015, she told me she wanted a divorce. And after that, I asked her why, and she said because I was boring. I wasn't an exciting person to be around and to be with. Ever since then, it's been an issue of trying to rebound and get myself back together again and to continue on. I have decided that friendships and relationships are something that I do want to start and do want to actively pursue now that I'm living down in Florida. Marriage is something that's totally off the table anymore, unless they're willing to sign a prenup. I said because I'm not losing any more of my money to divorces. And life is what it is. I've realized that I'm not in control of things. There's a higher power that's out there that's determining just how each day is going to go. So I live one day at a time, and hopefully I'll find somebody as a companion and a friend to go out and do things with. I can honestly say the happiest time of my life was the birth of my two children with my first wife, Nancy. The reason that it is carries so much importance having towards the birth of Christina and Christopher was the fact that we actually should have had three children. The first child, Nancy carried full term, and when it was time for the baby to come, baby was coming breech, so she had to have a C-section. When they opened her up, they saw that the baby had numerous congenital deformities, and I'm not going to go into detail on them, but had numerous congenital deformities, and that the baby lasted and lived approximately an hour and a half because of all the issues. We had to go through genetic counseling. We had to contact our family tree and find out why this happened, if it was a genetic issue or if it was just a fluke. And come to find out that this same issue had happened with my mother's side of the family. And so about a year later, a year and a half later, Nancy got pregnant again with Christina, my daughter. And of course we went through a lot of anxiety and waiting and anticipation. They did ultrasound, they did an amniocentesis on her just to make sure that the amniotic fluid was positive and there weren't any more genetic issues. And at 9 months, Christina was born. Because of how severe they had to cut Nancy open, that they had to do it again with Chrissy. And after she was born, as a parent, you're standing there and you're counting the 10 fingers, the 10 toes, and making sure that the whole person is there. And it was a great relief, and it was an enjoyable time for us both. And then about 2 years later, Nancy became pregnant again with my son Christopher, and they had to go through the same process, the same procedure, checking them out to make sure that they were okay physically. And when he was born, she had to have another C-section. And it's the same thing, the 10 toes, 10 fingers. I was never so happy to see my two children healthy. And since then, my daughter and my son both live in Arizona. They're very healthy, they're very happy, they're well-adjusted people. And, my enjoyment was the birth of my two children.